You're going to be so proud of your president because we're going to turn it around and we're going to start winning again. We're going to win at every level. We're going to win with the economy.
Top concern for many Americans, new polling shows President Trump's approval on the economy is falling. According to the latest AP and ORC poll, just 31% of Americans approve of Trump's handling of the issue.
Donald Trump just had what sources are calling the worst week of his entire presidency, and the fatal mistake he made could end up destroying everything he's built. We're not talking about bad poll numbers or negative press coverage. We're talking about actual legal defeats that might have exposed Trump as fundamentally weaker than anyone realized. A failed attempt to install a loyalist lawyer that reportedly ended with a judge's scorching rebuke so brutal it could haunt Trump for years. A humiliating retreat on Greenland that allegedly left him with absolutely nothing after threatening military force. And Supreme Court intervention that sources suggest might have revealed Trump pushed so far beyond legal limits that even conservative justices were stunned. This isn't just a bad news cycle. This could be the moment when Trump's facade of strength cracked so completely that everyone from foreign leaders to his own legal team might now see him as someone who folds under pressure. And once that perception takes hold, everything could unravel faster than anyone expects. But before we break down how catastrophically this week might have damaged Trump's political position, real quick, you cannot trust mainstream media to connect these defeats into the larger pattern of weakness they could reveal. That's why we built John Brown's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want analysis that actually explains why these losses matter beyond individual court cases, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happened this week might fundamentally change how everyone from judges to foreign leaders to congressional Republicans calculate their dealings with Trump. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what this week of defeats might actually represent.
We're going to win with every single facet. We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. Please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
Because this isn't just Trump losing some legal battles. Sources suggest this could be the exposure of a fundamental truth about his presidency, that Trump is actually weak, that the tough guy strongman image is performance, that when he faces real resistance from people with actual power to stop him, he backs down, he folds, he retreats. And once that pattern becomes undeniable, once judges and foreign leaders and members of Congress understand that standing up to Trump makes him crumble rather than fight harder, the entire dynamic of his presidency could shift. He might lose the fear factor that's been his primary tool for controlling people. And a Trump who can't intimidate is a Trump who might not be able to govern at all. Let's start with what might be the most humiliating defeat of the week. Trump's failed attempt to install loyalist lawyer Lindsay Halligan as U.S. attorney. Because the way this situation reportedly unfolded and ended could reveal everything about Trump's weakness when confronted by judges willing to enforce rules. Sources suggest Trump tried to bypass normal procedures to install Halligan in a key prosecutorial position. The Justice Department under Trump's control allegedly attempted to simply place her in authority despite questions about whether proper protocols were followed. And when a federal judge looked at what was happening, the response was reportedly devastating. The judge allegedly issued what legal experts are calling one of the most scorching judicial rebukes they've ever seen, called Halligan's conduct wildly unprofessional, accused her of masquerading in defiance of court orders. The language in the opinion was apparently so brutal, so incandescent, that it effectively ended the entire scheme without even requiring formal disciplinary proceedings. The judge's words alone were enough to make continuing impossible. Think about what that means. A Trump appointee, a judge nominated by Trump himself, looked at what the administration was trying to do and delivered such a blistering condemnation that Trump's team had no choice but to back down. They couldn't spin it, couldn't ignore it, couldn't defy the ruling and continue anyway. The judicial rebuke was so complete that the Justice Department reportedly just threw in the towel. And here's what makes this particularly significant. Halligan was allegedly someone Trump wanted in position specifically because of her loyalty. Someone who could be trusted to pursue his priorities without questioning them. Someone who would use prosecutorial power the way Trump wanted rather than following normal Justice Department procedures. Her installation was reportedly part of Trump's broader effort to control law enforcement machinery for his political purposes. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show, because the failure to install Halligan might represent more than losing one appointment. It could signal that Trump's attempt to completely politicize the Justice Department is running into judicial resistance he can't overcome. That judges are willing to call out loyalty appointments as unprofessional masquerading. That even Trump appointees won't rubber stamp every power grab. Legal experts who analyzed the situation allegedly used phrases like historic dressing down to describe what happened. Said it was important for judges to establish boundaries and say no when administrations act as though they have boundless impunity. That judicial pushback is the cornerstone of how the system is supposed to check executive overreach. And in this case, the pushback was so forceful, it might have sent a message to every other Trump loyalist about what happens when you defy court orders and professionalism standards. But the Halligan defeat might not even be the most embarrassing collapse Trump suffered this week, because sources suggest what happened with Greenland could expose Trump's entire foreign policy approach as bluster backed by nothing. All threats and no follow-through. All tough talk that evaporates the moment he faces real resistance. For weeks, Trump reportedly threatened Denmark over Greenland, suggested he might use military force to take control of the territory, threatened crippling tariffs, made bombastic statements about American expansion and territorial acquisition. The rhetoric was aggressive, threatening, designed to make Trump look strong and willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants. But then he apparently just abandoned the entire campaign. Sources suggest he backed down after international pushback, particularly a fiery speech by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney at Davos. And when Trump retreated, he allegedly tried to claim some sort of victory related to NATO access. Except analysts reportedly pointed out that the NATO access he was claiming as a win already existed under current agreements. Trump hadn't gained anything. He just created chaos, threatened allies, tanked markets, and then backed down with nothing to show for it. Think about what that reveals. Trump threatened military action against an allied territory belonging to a NATO member. That's the kind of threat you only make if you're actually willing to follow through, or if you're confident the threat alone will force capitulation. But Denmark didn't capitulate. International allies pushed back. Trump faced real consequences for his threats, and he folded completely. Share this video with everyone you know, because the pattern this could establish is devastating for Trump's foreign policy credibility. If other countries now understand that Trump's threats are empty, that he backs down when confronted with unified resistance, what leverage does he have in any negotiation? Why would adversaries take his warnings seriously? Why would allies feel they need to accommodate his demands if standing firm makes him retreat? The Greenland debacle might have taught the world that Trump is actually weak, that for all his tough talk about American strength and willingness to use force, he crumbles when the costs of following through become real, that he's a paper tiger whose roar is much bigger than his actual bite. And once that perception spreads, every foreign leader adjusts their calculations accordingly. But Trump's defeats this week weren't limited to Justice Department appointments and foreign policy. Sources suggest he also suffered a major setback at the Supreme Court over his attempt to remove Federal Reserve Chair Lisa Cook. And what makes this particularly significant is that even the conservative justices Trump appointed might have been stunned by how far he tried to push presidential power. The details of exactly what Trump attempted aren't fully public, but reports indicate he was trying to purge Cook from the Federal Reserve Board. The Fed is supposed to be independent from direct presidential control. That independence exists specifically to prevent presidents from manipulating monetary policy for political purposes. But Trump reportedly tried to remove Cook anyway, likely because he disagreed with Fed policies he believed weren't helping his economic agenda. And when the case reached the Supreme Court, justices allegedly slammed the brakes on Trump's attempt. Sources suggest the justices appeared stunned at how far Trump had pushed their limits, that even conservative members of the court who might generally support broad executive authority looked at what Trump was trying to do and said this crosses a constitutional line we can't accept. Think about what that means. Trump has appointed 3 Supreme Court justices. He's reshaped the court's ideological balance. He probably assumed that gave him significant leeway to push executive power boundaries. But even justices who owe their positions to Trump apparently weren't willing to let him destroy Federal Reserve independence, the institutional guardrails held despite Trump's pressure. Make sure you're subscribed because the Fed intervention could be particularly significant for Trump's economic agenda. If he can't control monetary policy through threatening or removing Fed officials, he has less ability to manipulate economic conditions before the midterm elections. He's stuck with whatever the independent Fed decides is appropriate policy rather than getting the interest rate cuts or expansionary policies he might want for political purposes. And the Supreme Court intervention might embolden other institutions to resist Trump's overreach. If the highest court in the country is willing to block his attempts to exceed presidential authority, lower courts might feel more confident doing the same. Regulatory agencies might be more willing to assert their independence. The cumulative effect could be Trump finding that fewer and fewer institutions are willing to bend to his demands. But step back and look at what all three of these defeats might reveal about Trump's fundamental character, because sources suggest there's a pattern emerging that could be devastating for his ability to govern effectively. Trump talks tough, makes threats, acts like he's willing to do whatever it takes, but when he faces actual resistance from people with power to stop him, he reportedly backs down. He retreats, he folds, and then he tries to spin the defeat as some kind of victory nobody else can see. Legal experts analyzing the week allegedly made this point explicitly. They said Trump crumbles when confronted with real consequences, that he's weak despite pretending to be muscular and powerful, that when someone says no and uses tools at their disposal to enforce boundaries, Trump stands down because he's terrified of being defeated in ways he can't spin as secret victories. Think about what that assessment means if it's accurate. Trump's entire political brand is built on being strong, being a fighter who never backs down, being someone who wins so much we might get tired of winning. But if the reality is that he consistently folds when facing serious opposition, the brand is a lie. The strength is performance. The wins are often just retreats he's repackaged as strategic victories. And once that pattern becomes widely recognized, once judges and foreign leaders and congressional members understand Trump is actually weak, everything changes. People stop being intimidated. They start testing boundaries more aggressively. They realize that standing firm against Trump's threats actually works better than accommodating them. Share this with everyone because we've seen this pattern before. Trump filed bankruptcy 6 times. He's launched lawsuits he later quietly withdrew or settled. He makes aggressive moves and then backs down when resistance proves stronger than expected. But in business, those patterns could be hidden or spun. As president, operating under constant scrutiny with every action analyzed, the pattern might be becoming undeniable. And sources suggest Trump might be getting desperate about his legal situation in ways that reveal how worried he is about all these defeats. Reports indicate he could be struggling to find lawyers willing to take on his most controversial cases. That top-tier legal talent might be increasingly unwilling to associate with defending actions that courts are calling unprofessional or beyond presidential authority. The Halligan disaster could make this worse. When a Trump-appointed judge issues a scorching rebuke calling conduct wildly unprofessional, that makes other lawyers nervous about participating in similar schemes. Nobody wants their reputation destroyed by association with cases that result in historic judicial dressings down. Nobody wants their name on legal filings that judges might later cite as examples of how not to practice law. And as Trump's legal troubles mount across multiple fronts, finding competent representation becomes increasingly critical. He needs lawyers for potential impeachment proceedings if Democrats take the House, for defending against court challenges to his policies, for handling investigations into administration conduct, for dealing with the mounting evidence that he's exceeded presidential authority in multiple areas. But sources suggest the pool of willing lawyers might be shrinking. Firms don't want the controversy. Individual attorneys don't want their careers tied to defenses that keep losing in embarrassing ways. The reputation risk might outweigh whatever fees Trump would pay, especially given his history of stiffing lawyers and then blaming them when cases don't go his way. Think about what happens if Trump genuinely can't find adequate legal representation for upcoming battles. He might be forced to rely on less experienced attorneys, on true believers who are more loyal than competent, on people like Halligan whose conduct gets called wildly unprofessional by judges. And inadequate legal representation in high-stakes constitutional battles could lead to even more devastating defeats that further expose his weakness. Now let's talk about how this week of defeats might affect congressional Republicans' calculations about defending Trump. Because if members of Congress are watching Trump back down repeatedly when faced with real resistance, that might change their assessment of whether loyalty to him serves their interests. Republican senators and representatives have been performing loyalty publicly, while many reportedly express private concerns. They defend Trump because they're afraid of his base and his ability to destroy them in primaries. But that fear is based on Trump appearing strong, on him seeming like someone who always wins and crushes his enemies. If the reality is that Trump folds under pressure, the fear calculation changes. Sources suggest some Republicans might be starting to test boundaries more aggressively. The War Powers resolutions on Venezuela, where several Republicans voted against Trump. The private comments like Cruz's leaked audio warning donors about disasters ahead. These could be early signs that Republicans are less intimidated than they were before, less convinced that blind loyalty is their only safe option. And if Trump continues suffering public defeats, more Republicans might feel emboldened to distance themselves. They might calculate that Trump is weakened enough that breaking with him doesn't guarantee political death, that voters might actually respect standing up to a president who keeps backing down and losing, that positioning themselves as independent rather than Trump loyalists could help in competitive districts or states. Make sure you're subscribed because the midterm dynamics could shift dramatically if Republicans sense Trump is weak. In normal circumstances, the president's party loses seats in midterms. If Trump appears strong, Republicans might unite behind him to minimize losses. But if Trump appears weak and losing repeatedly, Republicans might try to save themselves by creating distance. That could turn midterm defeats into complete catastrophes where Trump's weakness becomes a liability nobody wants to be associated with. But perhaps the most important aspect of this week is the lesson it might teach about resistance. Legal experts analyzing Trump's defeats allegedly made this point explicitly. They said resistance works, that when judges say no and enforce boundaries, Trump backs down, that when foreign leaders push back firmly, Trump retreats, that standing up to him is more effective than accommodating his demands. This could be crucial information for everyone who has to deal with Trump going forward. Democratic governors defending their states against federal overreach, judges evaluating administration actions, foreign leaders responding to threats, career civil servants being pressured to violate norms. The lesson from this week might be that principled resistance actually succeeds more often than capitulation. Trump's strength has always been psychological, making people believe he's more powerful than he actually is. That resistance is futile, that he'll destroy anyone who opposes him. But if this week revealed those beliefs are wrong, if standing firm actually makes Trump back down, the entire dynamic of his presidency could shift. People might stop being afraid, might start testing boundaries more aggressively, might discover that Trump's bark is far worse than his bite. Think about what that means for the remainder of his term. If courts continue blocking his overreach, if foreign leaders continue calling his bluffs, if congressional members continue breaking ranks when he goes too far, Trump could find himself increasingly constrained, unable to govern effectively because nobody fears the consequences of saying no to him anymore. And the midterm elections could become a referendum on strength versus weakness. Democrats arguing Trump repeatedly folds under pressure. Republicans trying to claim defeats are actually victories. Voters deciding whether they want a president who backs down from every serious challenge or whether they want leadership that actually delivers on threats and promises. So here's what this week of defeats might represent. A catastrophic exposure of Trump's fundamental weakness. A federal judge delivering a scorching rebuke so brutal it ended a loyalty appointment scheme. A humiliating retreat on Greenland that gained nothing and taught the world Trump's threats are empty. A Supreme Court intervention suggesting even conservative justices think he's pushed too far. And a pattern emerging that when Trump faces real resistance from people with power, he crumbles and backs down. The legal and political implications could be enormous. Trump might struggle to find adequate representation as lawyers see the judicial beatings defenders are taking. Congressional Republicans might feel less intimidated and more willing to distance themselves. Foreign leaders might stop taking his threats seriously. Judges might feel emboldened to block more aggressively, and voters might start questioning whether the strongman image was ever real or just performance masking weakness. Sources suggest legal experts are saying explicitly that Trump is weak, that he stands down when confronted with consequences he can't spin away, that resistance works better than accommodation, and if that assessment spreads, if it becomes the conventional wisdom about how to deal with Trump, his ability to intimidate and control could evaporate completely. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because we're covering every aspect of how these defeats might reshape Trump's presidency. Every new instance of him backing down when tested, every pattern of weakness that emerges, every way that judges and foreign leaders and congressional members adjust their strategies based on understanding Trump is actually weak despite his tough guy act. This could be the week everything changed, and we're tracking every development as the full implications become clear. Stay tuned.